Well, I'm going to start off on a little different tack now. Uh, Going back to our move to Mahomet and Daddy and his nephew building that house. He had the 3 acres, like I said, but there was no water on it. So the McCormicks gave us permission to use a spring that they had just over the fence line on their property. And that spring was hand dug by the old Mr. McCormick, Aunt Mag's husband. And the story goes that she sat with the gun watching for Indians while Mr. McCormick dug the well. It was about 6 foot deep and 4 foot in width. Just a vertical shaft, 6 foot deep, 4 foot wide. It was a ever-bearing spring, even in the hottest, driest time of the year and over the years. It still gave fresh, cold water. We used that well for a household and washing and, well, any need we had for water. Our house sat up on a hill about 200 yards from that spring, and my job, along with others, was to carry water for the house up from that spring. And even after you dipped it out, carried it up that steep hill, and sat it on the table where the dipper was, it would stay cold for a good long time. It was real good for keeping butter, things like that, maybe a jar of preserves, something you want to keep cool. So we used quite a bit thanks to the McCormick family. It's fenced off now, but my nephew owns Daddy's land, and he has a real fine well up there. We did a lot of hunting and trapping in my part of the country as kids. We used the steegle trap, which I know is cruel and hardly used anymore. Most people use live traps. The hunting, for that went, was mostly for squirrels for the table. We had a lot of squirrels along those creeks around us. Trapping, I trapped small fur-bearing animals, mostly possums. A good, well stretched and cleaned and cured possum hide bring you a quarter. You might get 50 cents for a good skunk. Well, fortunately, I never caught one in a trap. Killed a few out at night hunting them, headlighting them. We didn't have any deer then in that part of the country, but it's practically overrun with deer now. The reason we didn't have any, I suppose, was that practically everything was in row crop, cotton, corn, maize, high gear, and things like that, which took up all the land to speak of, and this wasn't any place for the deer to hide, and there weren't enough acorns. They just didn't hang out there. I'd usually, by the end of the trapping season, which is the end of cold weather, take my hides that had stretched clean and take them to burn it to the fur buyer. I don't know, wouldn't get much. Maybe if I got $10, I was lucky. But that was good spending money, and I really enjoyed getting out in the woods and doing that kind of thing. Of course, my daddy taught me all this stuff. He was a woodsman from way back, and he had taught me the wood lore, looking for trails of animals, things like that. Another little more on the comical side, I guess, was we had a big old brush arbor tabernacle there at Mahomet, set off way from the church a little ways. And they'd usually in the summertime, the weather was nice, we would have all the church services out there. It had a stage and had a little dressing room on each side of it, and the older kids would have plays, and they were real good melodrama type plays in the ilk of the villain with the long black mustache and the poor damsel in distress type. Also, they'd have the old cowboys. They'd dress up in their western finery and pack a toy gun and shoot each other all over the place. But I remember one year the Heart of Woman preacher had come there. Didn't really hire her, she just got what took up the collection. But a woman preacher was pretty much unheard of, particularly in our part of the country. So she was good, she was dynamic, and made a big impression on everybody. Crowds came. And one night at the end of her week-long protracted meeting, she got so carried away with what she was talking about that she fainted. And everybody, of course, rushed up there to see what was wrong with her, and they got her conscious and all this over a period of time, though, and, getting her made comfortable and everything. But in the meantime, the lights went out. We used a Delco plant for lighting. This was a series of wet cell batteries that turned a turbine that generated electricity. About what was good for was electric lights, and wasn't really very good for that. But anyway, the reason the lights went out, her husband and son had stole the Delco plant. Well, they kind of caught up with him, but it was talk of the country for a while there. A woman preacher, her husband and son stealing the Delco plant. We also had medicine shows come. A few came to Mahomet, mostly they were bigger crowds, of course, at Bertram or Briggs, but we'd be sure to go to the ones that showed at Mahomet. It was just that, medicine and a show. They sold cures for everything in the world. It was mostly alcohol, which make you feel good for a little while and make you feel awful bad for a long time. The show was, well, it was probably people in the community that could put on a better show than they could, but it was a little different. They had jugglers and tight-wire walkers, things like this. It's something you didn't see every day. I remember one show that came there had a boxing bear, and it seemed to me like this particular carnival was held over in church house. I'm surprised that they'd have something like that in the church house, but best I can remember, that's where it was. Anyway, this old bear, they had a sort of a ring up there on the stage, and he would spar around with the manager, and the manager would pretend to be knocked down, roll all over the floor, and that drew a laugh. And he'd let the old bear come down the aisle, because he had a chain around his neck and was holding on to him. Bear wasn't telling how old he was. He was all flea-bitten looking hair on him. But he had his boxing gloves on, and he'd threaten the crowd and raise his gloves in the air and put on a show. And it really impressed me as a young kid. I also had what was called box suppers. This was mostly for the benefit of the young courting couples. Girls would fix up a box of food, usually fried chicken or something like that, cake, pie, and the boys would bid on the contents of the box and the privilege of sitting with the young lady while they shared the lunch. His bidding was real high. It might go as high as a quarter. It was real. If the boy was really set on having dinner with this young lady, he might go to 50 cents, but not very often. Another time we had a panther on the loose in the country. There was a big old gully that run, I'm not sure where it started, but it run behind our house and went on northeast to the Mahomet Cemetery. And it must have been a really major stream at one time, centuries ago. But all it was then was high bluffs on each side and real rocky bottom, no water in it except when it rained, and a few wet weather springs in it. But anyway, it was in the middle of the night, and we heard that panther screaming, Daddy and I and Mother. But Daddy and I got up, he got his gun, and we started going in cross country in the direction of the panther screams. Well, lots of other people had heard it too, and when they didn't hear it, they'd been notified, a word of mouth, that there was a tiger out there, and he was at the cemetery by this time. Well, that gully kind of run out there at the cemetery, just a few hundred yards north of the cemetery, and I guess he took to the flat ground and went on about his business. But anyway, he had about 50 men and boys out there, men carrying their shotguns and their rifles, looking for that panther. Lucky somebody didn't get shot, but I don't think they did.